called The Problem of the
Okay.
Filioque in Leo III.
All
So,
right.
good.
Oh, okay. Anonymous Jones asks, "What about autocephalus?" He meant cynocephalus. Saint Christopher, is there a race of dogmen like Saint Augustine spoke about, having human souls and dog features, but a language, and were humanoid? Asking for a friend. Forgive the off-topic crazy stuff. So
Saint Augustine seems to talk about that in the City of God, and
yeah,
I can't quite remember if he says if he comes down on yes or no. What's true is he does address the issue of what we call the monstrous races. Um,
okay,
and by monstrous races, he means like cyclopses, centaurs, satyrs, dog people. He doesn't mean monstrous races like, oh, the Arab guy down the street or something like that. That's not what he
right,
was talking about, because his point was you could look at Saint Augustine's point was you could look at people from Sudan, Ethiopia, or the far frozen north, which would be like Germany or Denmark, or the Latin peoples, or the Persians, or the Arabs, and they have skin differences and some physiognomic differences, but they're pretty much everybody can say, oh, that's a guy, that's a human. There's no problem with that, even if they look different. The question was, what if you have this 15-foot tall guy with one eye, like a cyclops? All right. What about people who have like a human torso up above, and then like a goat body below, a satyr, or a centaur, with the horse body, I guess. And so St. Augustine's position, and I'd have to go into the City of God to find it. At the moment, I don't have the ability. I can't do that right now. But is that if they are indeed people, that if these are indeed actual creatures, all right, centaurs, dogmen, and they're talking and they're that kind of stuff, and they're not demonic apparitions. Okay, so they actually are entities. His view is that these would be humans, but for whatever reason, maybe whatever happened to them, they would still have human souls. They're just corrupt. They're just physically something is corrupted. I don't think he had the word for genetics. I don't know. Saint Augustine's not saying he believed
yeah,
that these existed, but his point was that if you have like a cyclops and they have like a society, and even if they're very primitive and they're talking in a language and what have you, those are evidences of humanity. And even
yeah.
remember St. Anthony the Great in his life of St. Paul of Thebes. I'm sorry, St. Jerome wrote the life of St. Paul of Thebes. All right. And in it, St. Anthony goes to visit St. Paul of Thebes. And St. Anthony of the desert encounters satyrs and fauns. I think maybe a centaur. And one of the satyrs talks to St. Anthony and says, look, we are humans. We're just this tribe that lives out in the desert. And I can't remember the explanation he gives for why they look like that, but we are actually people, and such. And Saint Jerome mentions that one of these satyrs had actually been brought into Alexandria during the time of the Emperor Constantine the Great, and like they brought into a cage, and he was injured and it died, and that he had known people who had seen it and talked to it, or something like that, and that that's. I think his implication was that if you're dealing with something that physical, it's probably not a demonic apparition if it has a physical substance. Now, someone might simply say, well, St. Jerome talked to somebody who said it. Is this just St. Jerome or St. Augustine relating events that they didn't see? I mean, obviously they're saying they never saw these events, but, that's their position. However, I am somewhat confident that there probably are no dog people.
Living dog people.
Yes, I'm going to go on a limb and say that. I don't know.
Well, allow me to qualify that with there are no living dog people yet.
Yes.
Because we now live in an age where there's genetic manipulation, so we can possibly bring back all these people.
That's an interesting question. Maybe if these were, I mean, obviously the fathers were talking about this in serious sense because the secular pagan writers talked about it, so they had to deal with it. And the patristic answer was generally, maybe they are, or maybe they're not. If they do exist, if this does happen, we have to deal with it, so we have to explain it. Just like you read the church fathers, and they would talk about like magic, all right. And their general view was magic was generally like a demonic illusion. It was like a hologram. created by demonic powers. Okay.
Yeah.
But that you could have instances in which, if God so allowed, the demons could interact with the physical world in a destructive way. But I mean, that's why up until I think about the 12th or 13th century, until for whatever reason in the post-Islam West, if they found somebody was a witch, technically there was no legal way to go after them except to excommunicate them from the church. Maybe they might be driven out of the village. There was actually a council of bishops in Germany in the 790s that says no one's allowed to put a witch to death because witches aren't real. And by what it meant by saying witches aren't real is that they acknowledge
they have no power.
Yeah, they would have said that there are people making deals with the devil and they can kind of make illusions and almost like holograms. But these are just that. That's all it is. They're not really flying and they're not really flying around. They're not doing any of these things. And the best way to fight them is what? They said make the sign of the cross and use holy water and say exorcism prayers. That's how you fight them. And various rulers actually prohibited people from accusing somebody of being a witch. And then you have new evidence, and then like killing them. All right, because how that would sort of witch trials. But again,
well, I hate to bring this up because first off, as we know, a lot of the time when we talk about gods from other religions, they're usually demons, and the topic of witches made me think about this meme, and I have to. It's just, especially when we think about Allah, in Islam, and was he obviously he sounds like a demon when you actually read the stuff. But then I was apparently this was in a Reddit forum about witches, I guess, trying to fight the Taliban. And it might be the funniest thing you saw it?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just going to put this up because it was just so bizarre. And it says, do not face Allah alone when astral projecting. And apparently this whatever she tried to summon apparently attacked her massively.
It's cursing. There's some cursing in there, so
yeah, I'll take it off. All right, hold on. Let me remove. But anyway, so the point is that apparently they learned their lesson about dealing with. They still think they're clearly dealing with a god, but that they can kill it, not realizing it's a demon, which is likely toying with them. But just kind of hilarious that it's brought up. You brought up witches technically not having any power, which is true. But if you're calling demons, they will eventually respond.
Well, I think I think Saint Isidore Seville in some of his works talks about, there may be occasions in which, for whatever reason, we're obviously talking about why does God allow demons to do certain things, certain things, all right? In the book of Job, God allowed the devil to have interactions and manipulation of physical events like lightning and such, all right?
Yeah.
But God had to allow that. And I do recall reading, maybe there was some 19th century Russian writer, monastic writer, who said something like, God restricts the powers of demons because if he simply allowed them to do whatever, there would be mass chaos on the planet. Because you're dealing with fallen angels who could conceivably, if God wasn't restricting what they were doing, they could, maybe cause earthquakes. Maybe they could cause things like that. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, this was just to kind of put in context, if you were able to catch up before the cursing, but this was apparently some group of very pro-American Wiccans who were specifically targeting this Allah demon because they wanted to mess with the Taliban. So they were seeking out this thing to attack it with their booga booga spells or whatever. And the point is, I mean, that's not the same. God restricting the demons makes sense, but what if you're poking the bear?
Oh yes.
I mean,
yeah. Well, you're
kind of asking for it.
Yeah, at that point, you're making a deal. You're opening yourself up. That's not a case of some bystander Christian.
Yeah, exactly. You're going out of the way, being a witch, thinking you can kill a demon that you think is a god. Good luck. All right, you're going to get exactly what you deserve. What?
That's when you end up getting possessed.
Yeah, well, she apparently didn't. Thankfully, apparently she just ended up mentally scarred or something, and had to put on all the healing spells and all the whatever, the incense,
She's a witch and she probably
aromatherapy and all that stuff. Watch me get. Someone's going to be like, aromatherapy? How dare you? But anyway.
Okay, so here you can put this up. We can read this real quick. Okay. It's from St. Augustine.
Nope. All right, where's this? Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Give me one moment. Trying to put that up. Okay.
It's in a private chat.
Okay. I put it up.
Can you increase the size a little bit so I can see?
I can try. Give me a moment. Let me see if there's... Yeah.
Hit the dismiss.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh, no. That's...
Okay, also hit dismiss. And also go over to the left side of the screen where it says City of God, Monstrous Races at the bottom. And X that out. Just X that out so we don't have any problems. Okay, so this is from, I believe, book of either from... It doesn't really tell you because, I don't know, whatever reason... it's from the city. It is from the City of God. I'm not sure what exactly what book of the
It
City
looks like this is like some edition that was made off of a public domain edition that they added a funky background.
Yeah, there's just so people understand. There's some real issue in Google Books where it's very difficult for whatever reason to find the Nicene and post-Nicene full view edition of the City of God so that you can search it. You can only find these preview editions. It's really weird. Okay, so St. Augustine is going to ask the question, the Dogman question. Okay, he talks about kainokephali, that's dog people. Whether certain monstrous races of men are derived from the stock of Adam or Noah's sons. All right, because remember, all people are derived from Adam and from Noah. There are two bottlenecks in human history. All right,
right.
This is why you will encounter people who get upset on Gab, for example, or others when someone says there's the human race. I mean, that's what the fathers talk about, the human race. Right. They may talk about races as well, but that doesn't mean there isn't a human race. All right. The word race was often used as kinds, as they talk about the race of the Latins, even if the Latins looked identical in some cases to the Greeks, they'd still say race. All right. But there is a human race that is those derived from Adam. All right, which is all men. Okay. It is also asked whether we are to believe that certain monstrous races of men spoken of in secular history have sprung from Noah's sons, or rather, I should say, from that one man from whom they themselves were descended. For it is reported that some have one eye in the middle of the forehead, that's the Cyclops. Some feet turned backwards from the heel, that's sort of the goat people. Some a double sex, the right breast like a man, and the left like a woman. That's something from Greek mythology I don't recognize immediately.
Sounds like a hermaphrodite.
Yeah, well, they're half the body is man, half the body is woman. That's what they're saying, and they alternately beget and bring forth. Others are said to have no mouth and to breathe only through the nostrils. Others are but a cubit high, so I guess, and therefore are called by the Greeks pygmies. They do exist, by the way. There are there are races of midget people.
Yeah, there are other tribes that eat them.
Yes, exactly. They mostly. I lived in the Congo, and I think there's very little on the left. The other African tribes, hunted them down. They say that in some places the women conceive in their 5th year and do not live beyond their 8th. So these are again what's being said. So too they tell of a race who have 2 feet but only 1 leg, and are of marvelous swiftness, though they do not bend the knees, and they are called Scipiodais. Because in the hot weather they lie down on their backs and shade themselves with their feet. Others are said to have no head, and their eyes and their shoulders. And other human or quasi-human races are depicted in mosaic in the harbor Espelond of Carthage, on the faith of histories of rarities. What shall I say of kainokephali, whose dog-like head and barking proclaims them beasts rather than men? But we are not bound to believe all we hear of these monstrosities. But whoever is anywhere born a man, that is, a rational mortal animal, no matter what unusual appearance he presents in color, movement, sound, nor how peculiar he is in some power, part, or quality of his nature, no Christian can doubt that he springs from that one protoplast, Adam. We can distinguish the common human nature from that which is peculiar and therefore wonderful. The same account which is given of monstrous birth. Can you go down a little bit further, Father?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The same account which is given of monstrous births in individual cases can be given of monstrous races. For God, the creator of all, knows where and when each thing ought to be, or to have been created, because he sees the similarities and diversities which can attribute to the beauty of the whole. But he who cannot see the whole is offended by the deformity of the part, because he is blind to that which balances it, and to which it belongs. We know that men are born with more than 4 fingers on their hands, or toes, or on their feet. This is a smaller matter. But far from us be the folly of supposing that the Creator mistook the number of a man's fingers, though we can not account for the difference. And so in cases where the divergence from the rule is greater, he whose works no man justly finds fault with knows what he has done. At Hippodiartus there is a man whose hands are crescent-shaped, and have only 2 fingers each, and his feet similarly formed. If there were a race like him, it would be added to the history of the curious and wonderful. Shall we therefore deny that this man is descended from that one man who was first created? As for the androgyni, or hermaphrodites, as they are called, though they are rare, yet from time to time there appear persons of sex so doubtful that it remains uncertain from which sex they take their name, though it is customary to give them a masculine name as the more worthy. And I can't read the rest of the text, unfortunately, because the preview edition does not allow it.
I wonder if there's a better way to get the City of God.
There is. Hold on. I can find it.
If you want, I can upload my copy of the PDF to the Discord.
I'm sure that it's the City of God by Augustine. It has to be. I'm going to check Archive. Simply because
Archive has it, and the Christian Classic Ethereal
Library. Okay.
Yep. It's the Nicene and Post-Nicene Fathers.
Yeah. So here's the CCEL.
Okay. Hold on.
I think we had Father Boniface on earlier.
Yeah, he's been on a couple of times. He had some audio issues, but he did talk to us for a little bit.
Okay. I just sent you a link to the CCEL. They do have a full...
pulling it up right now.
Okay.
As you can see, it looks like pretty much a copy of the CCL, the previous edition you were looking at.
Yes.
Give me a moment. It's just basically, someone copied it and put it on a fancy background and claimed to copyright it. But I am going to put that up now, just so you know, and for all of our listeners to remind you that this is probably the only show where we will talk about dog-headed people.
Okay. All right. Can you increase the size a bit so I can read it?
Yep. One moment.
Okay. Go ahead. All right. Hold on. Go up a little bit. I'm trying to find the part about the androgyni. Okay. Okay. For no one ever called them hermaphrodites. Some years ago, quite within my own memory, a man was born in the East, double in his upper but single in his lower half. I'm not sure that. Okay. Having 2 chests, 2 heads, 2 chests, 4 hands, but 1 body, and 2 feet like an ordinary man. So he was a conjoined twin. They were
a lot of these sound like they're actually stuff we can explain now.
And there is a very rare case, by the way, of babies being born with 1 eye in the forehead. They die within a day or 2 after being born.
Yeah,
they're severe, and so you can imagine cases in which that happened in the ancient world, and people are like, "Well, that's a Cyclops baby, and there must be Cyclopses around." Anyway, and he lived so long that many had opportunity of seeing him. All right, so some of these people would live a lot longer. But who could enumerate all the human births that have differed widely from their ascertained parents? As therefore no one will deny that these are all descended from that one man, so all the races which are purported or reported to have diverged in bodily appearance from the usual course which nature generally almost universally preserves, if they are embraced in that definition of man as rational mortal animals, unquestionably trace their pedigree to that one first father of all. We are supposing these stories about various races who differ from one another and from us to be true, but possibly they are not. For if we were not aware that apes and monkeys and sphinxes are not men, but beasts, remember St. Augustine and many still believe sphinxes existed, those historians would possibly describe them as races of men and flaunt with impunity their false and vainglorious discoveries. But supposing they are men of whom these marvels are recorded, what if God had seen fit to create some race in this way, that we might not suppose that the monstrous births which appear among ourselves are the failures of that wisdom whereby he fashions the human race, as we speak of the failure of a less perfect workman? Accordingly, it ought not to seem absurd to us that as in individual races there are monstrous births, so in the whole race of humanity, all right, so there's the race of the race, there are monstrous races. Wherefore, to conclude this question, continue it cautiously and guardedly. Either these things which have been told of some races have no existence at all, or if they do exist, they are not human races, or if they are human, they are descended from Adam. Can you go to the next? Let's see if he continues in any other fact.
Yeah, hold on.
There's an arrow at the top right.
Right, yeah.
I just want to see it. This just may be the only place he talks about it.
Hold
on. The antipodes. That's the flat Earth question, but we can talk about that later.
Okay.
That's interesting in itself. Okay, so St. Augustine's point is that, if this does exist, if they are rational and mortal animals, that's the definition of a man, a rational mortal animal. By animal, it means like an animate being. All right, mortal means capable of dying. Rational means you can talk. All right, you have discourse. If they do have that, then they're human. All right, and people can joke around or be offensive for whatever reason, but they're from an ontological, theological perspective, even the very first beginnings of human life in the embryo, in the womb, even though that is a human, all right, and even though someone could say, well, they can't talk, well, they have the capacity, they just don't have the potentiality expressed to the moment because the body hasn't developed, all right. You can find people who are born with heads that are. There was a famous woman in this movie in the 1930s, or man, I'm not sure. The One of Us line. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
And her brain's the size of, or his. I can't remember if it was he or her. Their brain was the size. He or hers. Him, I think it was. Yeah, it was him. His brain was the size of like a grapefruit, and his IQ was like that of a 3-year-old. All right.
Right.
But they were still a person. They're not that smart and everything. They're not. That's not a race of people, by the way. I mean, you can find people like that as a birth defect. There's a name for it, and such. So, St. Augustine's position and the patristic position is that if you do encounter these people, they are humans, and they are deserving of respect. St. Augustine did not have the idea, nor did St. Basil or St. Chrysostom, of, well, you got mentally retarded people and go ahead and get rid of them. That would have been considered monstrous to the Christian mentality and perspective, and what have you. So, again, St. Augustine seems to say we are not obliged to believe these stories about the dog people. So, are there dogmen? I've seen the cryptid videos and the talks about the dog people. Which almost sounds more like they're talking about werewolves or something. And werewolves are an entirely different thing in patristic literature, by the way, than races of people, than monstrous races of people.
I just assumed the dog people were just really ugly.
Well, you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe there existed some. Where do Kainokephali? Where are they supposed to have lived? I don't even know. You can look up. Generally they say things like in the Far East, almost like it's India or Central Asia. But I have a hard time believing anybody could mistake like someone from like India as a dog person. I mean, that's just not possible.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's some pretty.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there are people with birth defects, but they have a snout, they have big ears. I mean, dog people. That sounds like a nudist.
It looks like Ctesias in his Indica wrote a detailed report on the existence of Kainokephali in India. Dog-headed people in India. Okay, I hate to say this, but a lot of it seems to be just based on India.
Okay.
And there's ancient Libya. So, yeah, that seems to be where the most well-known Kainokephali type people were.
Okay. All right. Again, what can I say? If there actually were and are dog people, and they have the capacity to speak, and they're physical organisms, and they're not demonic apparitions, then you're dealing with some sort of race of humans that have divergent appearances, and for whatever reason. That's simply the patristic answer to that.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess so. We've talked about the dog person.